Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Germany's political scene has been shaken by recent remarks from AfD co-leader Tino Chrupalla, who suggested that Poland could pose more of a threat to Germany than Russia, drawing criticism from across the political spectrum, including inside his own party. To help us understand the implications of these comments and what they reveal about the AfD's direction, we're joined by Maciej Kisilowski, Associate Professor at Central European University. Thanks so much for joining us here on TVP World.
Good morning.
So before we get into these highly controversial statements, tell us just kind of briefly, paint a picture for our viewers, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland, where do they stand really politically? They're on the right, they've done very well in the last elections, but tell us, in your mind, how much of an impact they actually have on German politics.
Well, they are part of the global revolutionary conservative movement that we see from the United States, the MAGA movement of Donald Trump, through various Western European countries, France most notably with Marine Le Pen, and of course very prominently here in Eastern Europe with Viktor Orban, Robert Fico, Andrej Babiš, and of course Jarosław Kaczyński and Sławomir Mencen, two leaders of now split radical conservative movement in Poland. And the most interesting aspect from the geopolitical perspective is that all those movements are very nationalist, and yet they are trying to pursue a global political revolution to fundamentally change what we mean by democracy. Viktor Orban once put it very aptly that they want to build what he called an illiberal democracy. So why is it geopolitically interesting? Because, of course, there is an inherent contradiction when nationalist movements that promote and build their reputation on egoism, on America first, Germany first, Poland first, try to cooperate internationally. And between Poland and Germany, that can lead to a very, very dangerous situation. On your station, I've repeatedly warned against the real threat, which is not from Poland to Germany, but from AfD to Poland. Yeah. This radical German party, if they ever get to power or anywhere close to power in Berlin, they will pose a grave threat to vital national interests of the Polish state.
Okay. Yeah, and exactly on that comment, I mean, this was said very recently on public television in Germany. Tino Chrupalla, who's the co-leader of the AfD, said exactly in the much of context that we can have it here, is that actually Poland could be as dangerous to Germany, rather or more dangerous to Germany than Russia. And he's saying directly that Putin is no threat to him. I mean, this is also a party that has been more than controversial, has shown its closeness and proximity to Russia, to the Kremlin. So how worrying is this kind of statement, and does this really reflect a unity across that party?
Well, fortunately, the other co-chair, Alice Weidel, distanced herself a bit from those comments, but it also reflects the fact that Weidel represents more of the Western German AfD, and Chrupalla is the Eastern German, where AfD is the strongest. I would not, be calmed by those splits and those divisions, because we see all over the world where those radical conservative ideas lead, and they lead to Putinism. That's why they are close to Putin. It's not a personal sympathy towards him, but it's simply an ideological alignment. And that's why, from the Polish perspective, the parties such as Konfederacja, our own radical conservative party, that is caucusing with AfD in the European Parliament, that is supporting AfD, is truly representing a bit of a Turkey voting for a Thanksgiving. Because if AfD ever comes to power, we may see much more of a Donald Trump style of politics from Berlin. And if Donald Trump's style of politics it comes to Berlin, Poland would be the first victim of it, just as Canada and Mexico are in case of America. If we see ruthless, transactional, egoistic, aggressive moves from Berlin, this is going to completely change how Poland will need to see its security. Currently, our basic idea is we have only friends to the west of us, and we need to focus on the threat from the east. If AfD comes to power one day, we will come to this historic, awful situation that Poland repeatedly faced throughout its history, and it always led to tragedy, which is when we will truly have two enemies, both from the east and from the west. And this is absurd that Polish right-wing parties are trying to say that current democratic governments of Germany represent this threat, because this can't be farther from the truth. Yes, this is exactly what can come to fruition if AfD comes to power. But of course, our right-wing parties in Poland would not dare to admit it because they are aligned with AfD ideologically.
Right. But at the same time, I do want to, you said this division of East and West, and also if we look at, just briefly at the AfD itself, as you said, the co-chair said something else, Alice Weidel has distanced herself. There's also, if you look a bit further, not that long ago, within the party, several individuals, MPs, Lukasen, Stefan Müller, apparently a motion going around where they've specifically said things that contradict on natures of defense. Do they actually support the German army? They want conscription, they don't want it. So is this split going to, let's say, open up more? Is this sort of a split of the AfD, or do you think this is only temporary? Because, I mean, that's fundamental if they can't agree on defense.
Any radical conservative party that we have seen around the world needs to have a very strong enemy around which they mobilize their base. So my prediction is that Poland is a perfect enemy. There can be territorial grievances. Almost 40% of Polish territory is former Germany. So this can be exploited, and many more. Yes, and the Polish economy is booming while German economy is stagnating. People may start looking at how much money they have actually given Poland through their taxes, and that's billions of euro of German taxpayers' money through the EU cohesion funds and agricultural funds went to Poland over the last 2 decades. All of this, in my view, make Poland a perfect enemy, a threat, as Mr. Krupala put it, to mobilize the nationalist German, the potentially nationalist Germany around. So I am very pessimistic about the Polish-German relations if AfD comes anywhere close to power, because of the internal logic of this kind of movements. They need enemies, and I would make my bet that Poland would be a perfect boogeyman for German nationalists.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And also in that context of what Mr. Krupala said, it was very much also about this extradition refusal by Poland. So let's also go into that for a minute. That was also specific, but this has been obviously feeding into this nature of this dialogue of saying, well, there's a threat from Poland and nothing from Russia, which I think is also interesting to note there. Also, speaking of recent threats, there was an operation within central Germany not that long ago, also within the last sort of 48 hours, and there were no arrests made, a criminal operation looking at raids and actually discovering a plot potentially to actually kidnap the former health minister, also associated here everything with some strings connected to the AfD. How worrying is this? I mean, this is not the first time a specific group here called the Kaiserreichsgruppe, these far-right extremists, not the first time. I mean, how worrying is this kind of trend? Is this something that's going to repeat itself, and are the authorities doing enough to tackle it?
again, comparatively speaking, violence is becoming more and more of a problem because of this deepening polarization between the liberal democratic mainstream and those radical conservatives. In fairness, comparatively speaking, violence has been perpetrated by both sides. We remember the nearly successful assassination on both Donald Trump and Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. But here we have one of the many examples which also we can cite at length of right-wing violence. And this is a more general problem, which is that if we have two political forces in our democracy that don't see their argument as simply a matter of this or that election, who wins, who is in the opposition, but both sides increasingly see the current political controversy that we are witnessing in a variety of countries, not only in Germany, as an existential matter. And if you have that kind of rhetoric, that kind of belief that the win of the other side poses an existential threat, unfortunately, violence becomes one of the consequences of that kind of fatalistic view that we increasingly see truly from both sides. Both sides now convince their electorates that the victory, even a single victory of the other side in election, spells some existential doom to the values, fundamental values that they proclaim. This is a very dangerous situation, and that's why we are seeing the spike in political violence.
Right. As you said, the spike in political violence is unfortunately something that we've seen now more of on both sides. I'm also curious, I mean, looking at the nature of the AfD, they're still at this point in time the second largest political force and party in Germany. They've seriously increased their standing in terms of actually having voter access, but they're not politically connected. They're not part of the coalition. Most of the parties have ruled out completely working with them, but they represent a large part of the electorate. So how do we square this one? Because at the same time, banning them, banning the party that's been talked about, tried by the German government, not really going anywhere. So what do we say about that briefly?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I actually would my take on the opinion polls is that they stabilized around a quarter of the electorate, which is comparatively low. In Poland, radical similar parties, which is Law and Justice and Konfederacja, together have more than 40%, and their presidential candidate won the popular vote in June. The same in the US. So comparatively speaking, the support for this radical right is rather low still. Even in France, it's much higher. Many countries where it's much more than a quarter of the electorate. But of course, Germany is special, and especially it's a danger to Poland for the reasons I mentioned. I also want to very briefly note that Germany is radically investing in militarization. This was supported by all forces, including democratic ones. But if Germany becomes unquestionably the strongest military in Europe, and it's on its way to be there very, very soon, then we will, of course, the stakes will be much higher, because if that strongest European military is going to be taken over by the far right, by neo-fascists, we will have a very serious problem in Poland and more broadly in Europe.
Right. Well, at the same time, as we've already noted today, there's still that split. They're still far from political control, so we'll see how it works out. But look, thank you so much for all those insights. Guest chair this morning, Maciej Kisilowski, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, but stay tuned right here for much more news and commentary on TVP World. Bye.